The clock struck midnight when Khalid's car rolled quietly through the gates of his massive estate. The mansion stood tall and proud, glowing under the faint lights that lined the driveway. To outsiders, it was the house of dreams, a symbol of success and wealth. But to Khalid, on that particular night, it felt unusually cold and silent. He had spent the entire day in meetings, traveling from one office to another, signing documents worth millions, shaking hands with powerful men. Yet, as he stepped out of his car and handed the keys to his driver, he felt a strange emptiness inside. For years, Khalid had built his life around business. He was known in the corporate world as a ruthless tycoon who never lost a deal. His schedule was always full, his phone always buzzing, and his mind always racing with numbers and strategies. But while his empire grew, his family life shrank into the background. His young son had grown up mostly under the care of nannies and the maid. Maria, while Khalid traveled the world chasing success. He thought he was doing it all for his child's future. But in reality, he was losing the very moments that mattered most. That night, when he entered his mansion, the silence struck him. Usually, when he came home late, everyone was asleep, and the house felt like a museum, grand, beautiful, but lifeless. He loosened his tie and walked across the marble floor, his footsteps echoing in the vast hallway. He expected the same stillness as always. But then, something unexpected happened. From the far end of the house, a faint sound reached his ears. It wasn't the noise of the television or the hum of appliances. It was softer, warmer, like laughter. Khalid stopped in his tracks. At this hour, he frowned, confused. The laughter came again, mixed with the voice of a child. He instantly recognized the small voice. It was his son. His heart skipped a beat. Quietly, he followed the sound, his expensive shoes barely making a noise on the polished floor. The closer he got, the clearer the voices became. It wasn't just laughter. It was conversation, playful chatter, and the rhythm of a bedtime story. His son was awake, and someone was with him. When Khalid reached the living room, he slowed his pace and stood near the doorway, careful not to reveal his presence. His eyes widened at the sight before him. There on the carpet, his son sat with Maria, the maid. The boy's small hands held a toy car, and his face glowed with happiness. Maria sat beside him, smiling gently, her voice soft as she told him a story. Every now and then, she reached out to fix his hair, pat his back, or hold him close when he giggled too hard. It was such a simple scene, yet it hit Khalid harder than any business deal ever had. His son looked alive in a way Khalid had not seen before. There was no fear, no sadness, no loneliness, just pure joy. The boy leaned into Maria's side as though she was more than just a caretaker. She was his comfort, his safe place, the warmth he needed in the absence of his father. Khalid felt a lump rise in his throat. He realized that while he had been signing contracts late into the night, this woman had been here, giving his son the love and attention he had failed to provide. For years, he had thought money was enough, that giving his son a luxurious life was the same as being a good father. But in that quiet moment, watching them together, he understood how wrong he had been. The boy's laughter echoed in the room again, and Khalid's heart twisted. He wanted to step forward, to call out his son's name, to take him in his arms. But something held him back. Guilt, maybe, or perhaps fear that his son might not even recognize him as the man who was supposed to be closest to him. He stayed hidden, watching every little gesture. Maria's patience, the boy's innocence, the bond they shared, it was all a reminder of what he had missed. This was what family was supposed to look like. Not boardrooms, not profits, not awards. Just love. Minutes passed, but to Khalid, it felt like hours. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the scene. The mighty tycoon, who could control entire industries with his decisions, now stood powerless in his own house. He had walked in expecting silence, but instead, He had stumbled upon a truth he wasn't ready to face. That late return, unplanned and ordinary, was becoming the turning point of his life. For the first time, Khalid wondered if he had truly been living or if he had been too busy chasing the wrong kind of success while losing the most precious treasure right in front of him. Khalid stood quietly by the doorway, his heart pounding harder with every second. He had prepared himself for many things in life: losses in business, betrayals in deals, struggles in the market, but nothing had prepared him for the sight unfolding just a few steps away. His son was sitting cross-legged on the carpet, his face glowing with joy, while Maria, the maid, leaned close to him, holding a book in her hands. The boy's small voice broke the silence. "Read it again, Maria, please. Just one more time." Maria laughed softly, a sound so gentle that it warmed the entire room. "If I read it one more time, you must promise me you'll try to sleep," she replied. Brushing his hair back with motherly affection, Khalid froze. Those words, that gesture, it was not the voice of a servant doing her duty. It was the voice of someone who loved deeply. Someone who had taken responsibility not just for the boy's care, but for his heart. Maria's eyes shone with patience as she began reading again, her arm resting lightly around the child's shoulders. Khalid's son leaned into her, his little fingers gripping the edge of the book. At moments, he would look up at her, smiling as if she were his entire world. And then, the boy said something that shattered Khalid completely. "I wish you were my mother." The words hit him like a storm. He gripped the doorframe for support, his breathing uneven. The boy had not said it in anger or sadness. He had whispered it innocently, as though it were the most natural wish in the world. A simple longing from a child who had grown up in loneliness. Maria's eyes widened at the words, and tears quickly welled up. She hugged the boy tightly, her voice trembling but soft. "My dear, I am not your mother," she said, kissing his hair, "but I love you like one. And don't forget, you already have a father who loves you too." Khalid felt his knees weaken. Even after carrying the weight of raising his son, even after giving all her time, love, and care, Maria still defended him. She didn't try to take his place. She didn't plant bitterness in the boy's heart. Instead, she reminded him of a father who had barely been around. Khalid's chest tightened painfully. Shame burned in him, stronger than any humiliation he had ever felt in public life. He thought of the countless nights he had spent in hotels and offices, far away from home, convincing himself it was all for his son's future. But here was the truth. His son's future didn't need millions in the bank. His son's future needed bedtime stories, warm hugs, and someone to listen. As he stood there, invisible in the shadows, Khalid watched his boy crawl into Maria's lap. She set the book aside and began telling him a story from memory, one filled with kindness and lessons about honesty and courage. The boy's eyelids grew heavy, but his smile never faded. His small hands clutched her arm tightly, afraid to let go. Khalid felt an ache in his chest that no doctor could cure. It was the ache of realization. He had been replaced not by wealth, not by another man, but by love. Maria had given his son the emotional security he had failed to provide. He thought back to his own childhood. He had grown up in a strict household where his father valued discipline over affection. Perhaps that was why he had repeated the same mistake, thinking money could substitute for time. But watching his son now, Khalid understood something for the first time. Children don't remember the price of their toys, but they always remember who tucked them in at night. The boy yawned and looked up at Maria one last time. "Promise you'll never leave me." Maria's eyes softened. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "I promise. As long as you need me, I'll always be here." Khalid's vision blurred with tears. He turned away for a moment, covering his mouth to stop himself from making a sound. The powerful tycoon, feared in boardrooms and respected in society, stood trembling like a broken man. He wanted to walk into the room, to say something, to take his son into his arms and beg for forgiveness. But he couldn't. Fear held him back, fear that his son might push him away. Fear that the gap between them was too wide to close, so he stood there, quietly, as his son slowly drifted into sleep in Maria's arms. She carried the boy gently to his bed, tucking him in with the care of a true mother. She stayed by his side until he was fast asleep, whispering a prayer for his happiness. Only then did she switch off the light and step out of the room. Khalid quickly moved back into the shadows so she wouldn't notice him. His heart was racing, his mind spinning. He had just witnessed the most unbelievable scene of his life. He had expected to find his house silent, his son asleep, and his role as father intact. Instead, he discovered that another person had taken his place in the boy's heart, not because she wanted to, but because he had left a space that had to be filled that night. Khalid realized that he was no longer just a businessman returning home late. He was a stranger in his own son's world. And unless he changed, he would lose the boy completely. Khalid barely slept that night. He paced across his giant study, his footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. The mansion felt heavier than ever, its walls closing in with silence. His mind refused to let go of the image, his son curled in Maria's arms, whispering wishes that cut through his heart. All his life, Khalid had chased power and respect. He had conquered boardrooms, crushed rivals, and built an empire. But in the eyes of his little boy, he was almost a stranger. At dawn, he finally gathered courage. He walked to his son's room, determined to face what he had been running from. When he opened the door, the boy was still asleep, his small body curled up under the blanket. Maria sat on a chair nearby, her head resting against the wall, exhausted from staying awake all night. The sight humbled him. While he had been absent, she had carried responsibilities that were not hers to bear. Later that morning, when the boy woke, Khalid stepped forward. The child blinked at him, confusion in his eyes. He didn't rush forward like children in stories do when they see their father. Instead, he looked hesitant, as though unsure if Khalid's presence was real. "Papa?" He whispered softly. The single word pierced Khalid's heart. He bent down quickly, opening his arms. "Yes, my son. It's me. I'm here." The boy hesitated for a moment, then slowly climbed out of bed and walked toward him. Khalid pulled him into a hug, holding him so tightly as though afraid he might vanish. "I'm sorry," Khalid whispered into his ear, his voice breaking. "I should have been here with you. I should never have left you alone for so long." The boy didn't reply, but he rested his head on his father's shoulder, silent but forgiving. For Khalid, that silence was more powerful than words. Later, Khalid asked Maria to meet him in the garden. She stood nervously, unsure of what to expect. But instead of anger, Khalid bowed his head slightly. "You have done for my son what I failed to do. You gave him love, time, and care. I cannot repay you for this." Maria shook her head gently. "I only did what was needed, sir. Every child deserves love. I gave him mine because he needed it. But he still longs for yours. He needs his father more than anything." Her words sank deep into Khalid's heart. He realized he still had a chance not to erase the past, but to change the future. From that day onward, Khalid changed his life. He started coming home early, leaving business deals to others. He spent evenings helping his son with homework, stumbling through math problems but laughing along the way. He listened to his stories, no matter how small, and tucked him into bed at night. Slowly, the distance began to shrink. The boy, who once clung to Maria for comfort, now began running into his father's arms. Laughter filled the mansion not from wealth or luxury, but from simple moments, a game of chess, a shared meal, or a bedtime story told in Khalid's deep, warm voice. Khalid also grew closer to Maria. Not as a servant, but as someone he deeply respected. He often thanked her for saving his son from loneliness, for protecting his innocence, for being the heart of the home when he himself was absent. Sometimes, he wondered if God had placed her in their lives to teach him a lesson he might never have learned otherwise. Months later, one quiet evening, Khalid sat with his son in the garden. The boy climbed onto his lap and wrapped his arms around him. "Papa," he said softly, "you don't leave anymore." Khalid's eyes filled with tears. He kissed his son's forehead and whispered, "No, my child. I will never leave you again." And in that moment, he realized something greater than all his riches. True wealth is not measured in money, property, or fame. True wealth is measured in love, in presence, and in the bond shared with those who call us family. The tycoon who once ruled boardrooms finally found his greatest victory not in the world outside, but in the heart of his son.